Good morning, and thank you for having me. Before I speak about Sobukwe, I'd like to correct, I think, an error that comes from the part of the media and obviously the government by narrativizing or insisting to reduce Sharpeville Massacre Day to Human Rights Day. If you understand what Sobukwe was about, and if you understand what the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania was about, you'll understand that Sobukwe's attempt was to shift the discourse away from human rights into the question of the land dispossession. So it's quite sad that each and every year we are invited to speak to the media, and we are invited to particularly keep insisting on upholding a lie. There's no such thing as Human Rights Day. It is a lie, it is fiction, and it is an erasure of our history. So perhaps we need to start there before we go into unpacking the man that is Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. And I hope, Hugo, that next year when you have your guest, you will refrain from repeating lies. You will refrain from telling our nation fiction. You know, our children need to know that this day is not about human rights. There were no human rights to begin with. So Sobukwe did not want human rights. He wanted black people to have their land. And when black people have their land, the whole discourse of human rights becomes redundant. So it is quite childish and utterly foolish
is land not one of our human rights,
and
though?
insist that
Sorry, Zandi,
the
is
people
land not one of our human rights?
No, it cannot be. You cannot reduce land into rights, because when you do that, you are merely looking at land from a colonial perspective, and that's the problem. So we understood that land cannot be reduced into a right, because land when you look into land as Africans, it is something that you cannot quantify it and reduce it into a right. You know, you cannot say this person has right to land and that person does not have right to land. You know,
But surely the fact that it was taken away from us, right, depicts what belongs to us, what is predetermined as should be.
Of course, when you come to the question of land from a colonial perspective, you will reduce it to rights. This is what I've been saying. And Sobukwe and the PAC were very clear that the land cannot be reduced into rights, because the land is not an entity. You know, land does not belong to us. It belongs to people who are here now. It belongs to people who have gone. And it belongs to people who are yet to be born. And therefore, you cannot reduce it to a mere right. And therefore, the fiction that this day, or the 21st of March 1960, is commemorated as a Human Rights Day is fallacious, and it should be done away with. People need to read deeper into
let's talk about what we should call this day, or what it should represent. What is a real picture according to you?
Before you want to know what you should call, you should understand the context, right? You should understand what Sobukwe was doing. You should understand what we call Sobukwe's paradigm of resistance, where in the Sharpeville moment, Sobukwe is telling black people that, look, we need to break the mental, we need to break the shackles of slavery. We need to put away the past, and we need to assert ourselves as human beings. And thereby he's going against the apartheid and the colonizers' plan to reduce black people into slaves. And so that moment, Sobukwe is curating a new human being. Mercy Pakela was saying here that nothing has changed since the dawn of democracy. It is because Sobukwe's project was interrupted. Therefore, you cannot have, you know, a liberated person. Black people in their majority, even though they are free, are still slaves. We can see in how our children are getting killed at university. You can see how our children are even denied their right to education. People who are doing creative works in the arts are treated like, you know, non-beings. And we want to insist that South Africa is a nation that is founded on rights, and that black people are no longer slaves. The truth is that the 1960 project interrupted a process of liberating black people from a psychological level, firstly, before anything else.
Well, let's talk about how you've picked up the baton in order to deal with the issues that Robert Sobukwe stood for.
Can you say that again?
I said, can we talk about the role that you've played in picking up the baton?
The role that we play?
Correct. You as your organization.
The Black House Collective, as most people know, we are involved in excavating the histories that have been erased, the histories that have been distorted. Many years before today, people did not know that the man behind the Sharpeville strike or the Sharpeville protest was not actually Sobukwe. Sobukwe was in Orlando. The man there that was in Sharpeville at that time was a young person known as Nyakani Tolo. So Black House Collective has been doing lots of work to put the name of Nyakani Tolo in the national discourse. Today, we know that our children know who was Nyakani Tolo as much as who and how Nyakani Tolo relates to Sobukwe. And we've also done amazing work in terms of telling an alternative history for our people, especially young people in Soweto. We've done several programs where we take young people into camps and we educate them about, female intellectuals of the struggle that have been erased, people like Mama Zandi Sobukwe, people like Mama Winnie Khware, who was the first female president, by the way, from the Black Consciousness Movement. So those projects we do for the purpose of mentally liberating Black people. It's interesting that people know about Steve Biko, yet they don't understand how Steve Biko takes the baton from Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe's project of liberating the African.
Now this process of educating and equipping young people with the real history, or the real winners in this history, as you point out, what is the ultimate objective of this process? How are they using it in today's life?
The youth, as you might be aware, are involved in a struggle because, like Biko says, you cannot be conscious and remain a slave. So once young people become conscious of the environment, once young people become conscious of the fact that 1994 was a lie, there is no freedom, there is no liberating, you then begin to see young people asserting themselves in the protest, in the picket line. You then begin to see young people finding the tools to speak about.
Zandi, I'm afraid we've run short of time, so we're going to